I have been having a blast with Arc Raiders. It's probably my favorite multiplayer game of the year. In the last video, I spoke about my concerns with the story, but concluded that I was hopeful given that there was a compelling element to the narrative in the implications of the spaceport, which built ships that allowed some groups of humans to flee Earth prior to the robot onslaught. I speculated further that since the Ark come from the sky, perhaps those humans that left may be sending them to Earth for some yet unknown reason, or perhaps some rebellious robots had taken control and were operating on their own to launch the attacks. The narrative thread, that one in particular that I think is interesting, is almost entirely unexplored in the 63 quests that Ark currently has. I will be making a separate video about the story, which I do think still has potential, but doesn't really seem to be a focus point for Embark. Today, I want to talk specifically about the quests, now that I've completed all of them. And this video is pretty critical of one element of this game, but I think it is important to keep in mind that the reason why you're watching this video today, as opposed to a few days ago, is because I've been so addicted to playing Arc Raiders that I haven't had time to put this together. So I'm still having a great time. It's a great experience. I just don't think it delivers in this one particular realm, and this one element about it is put together pretty poorly. So let me start by talking about quests generally. If I play through a quest in a game, I kind of expect two things. Character progression, which could be in the form of experience, skills, gear, or some other item or ability which puts me ahead of where I was prior to starting the quest. And I also expect some story. It can be as simple as this guy is hungry, get him some food, or as complex as covertly overthrowing a government. I just want some kind of story arc that has a starting point, an ending point, where something has changed and probably some climatic moment. I don't feel that Arc really delivers on either of these, and if you're just starting to play Arc Raiders right now, I would tell you to completely ignore the quests and opt to exclusively pursue workshop upgrades, trials, and experience. And this doesn't mean that Arc as a whole is bad. They clearly didn't want to set out to create a very engaging narrative. Their goal was to create a fun PvPvE sandbox that has some contextual sense via world building that makes it all work together, and that's fine, and they accomplished that. Most players won't engage with the story of multiplayer games. I have surely never really given that much of a fuck about what was going on in Siege or Call of Duty, for example, in terms of story, and that's totally chill. I just feel like Embark missed an opportunity that is so unique to the extraction genre by not trying to deliver a more engaging narrative experience. Tarkov, which is arguably the first in the extraction genre, with the Division's survival mode being the first to market progenitor, but regardless, Tarkov understands how impactful a well thought out narrative experience can impact this genre. I mean, despite Tarkov having now achieved the kind of main extraction shooter title, it still markets itself as a hardcore story-driven MMO featuring elements of FPS and RPG. You might not realize that the quests in Tarkov have some pretty solid narrative progression and seeks to tell an interesting story, because most of the ways that people engage with the game or see others engaging with the game is through FPS PvP, but the PvE community around Tarkov is very sizable because the progression of completing the quests, exploring the world, and building your hideout is so satisfying. All this is just to say that the story component of an extraction-style game can be utilized to round out the experience in a way that makes its absence feel kind of underwhelming in Arc. And I don't think this is a new concept. Games like Halo and Gears of War were able to consistently deliver satisfying narrative experiences and engaging long-term multiplayer modes. I know that live service games are a different beast, and I don't want a PvE-only mode in Arc or a campaign. I'm just saying that there still could have been a story component to the game that was delivered via these quests that was impactful, and the game would have been probably better for it, in my opinion. Let's get back to my two elements of a quest so I can further illustrate where I think Arc lacks. So, progression. What happens when you complete a quest? I guarantee that a large majority of you probably just thought you get experience. The quests in Arc do not grant you experience points, and thus do not impact your character's level or allow you to invest in new abilities. This just rubs me the wrong way, and I cannot think of another experience that has questing as an element of the game and it doesn't grant some direct path to innate qualities for your character. I'm sure they are out there, but still, this seems very backwards to me. This isn't to say that there is no progression, as like in most extraction games, your success is in many ways tied to the gear that you have access to. A more experienced player will have more items they can equip, more blueprints in Arc, and this will create effective loadouts or, be used to craft helpful items. You're probably thinking that since Arc Raiders doesn't give you the experience, then the quest must offer some item rewards that meaningfully advance the equipment you have. No, it does not, and I think this really came to a head when I was completing quest like 50 or something out of 63 total, and I shit you not, the reward for this quest was 1,000 coins. For context, there's not a single gun that you can buy from a trader for 1,000 coins. You can basically purchase a handful of rounds or the most useless items in the game with that amount of coins. Now, not all of the rewards are this terrible, but this was a late stage quest, at which point I had basically exclusively quested and done maybe 1 or 2 runs with a team to kill bigger Arc, and I had like 150k coins in my stash on top of the fact that I had upgraded the size of my stash with coins, so I'd made even more than that. The other items you get are largely all lower class tools or weapons, which can be easily looted in-game with a free loadout if you know where you are looking. By my personal count, there are 5 items of any real value that you get across all 63 quests. There are 3 blueprints and 2 snap hooks. Now, yeah, the blueprints are nice, especially the Hull Cracker, which basically allows you to take on the bigger Arc without fear of dying, but there are only 3 of them, once again, across 63 quests. And I'm being very charitable about categorizing these snap hooks as useful because I really just like how fun they are to use. And at the end of the day, they do what zip lines do, but maybe a shorter range and with an unlimited number of charges. Fun, useful, but probably not going to be a part of essential kit for 99% of players. So the quests offer virtually no progression towards your gear and literally no character progression. If you've played other extraction games, you're probably thinking that this must at least unlock access to additional items with the traders. You do the quests with them, so you would think that some kind of reputation system might exist, but no. The items you can purchase from the traders seems to be exclusively attached to your level, which once again is not impacted by the quests. I think just about everything also becomes available from the traders at level 20, so it's also not something that you really have to grind out that far for. All this just kind of points to the quests lacking any material progression for the player. There is factually no substantially valuable progression attached to these quests. But like I said earlier, this is merely half of what a quest could offer. I love stories in games, and mostly view gaming as a platform through which a story can be told in a format unavailable in other mediums. Arc does a great job of this by allowing their sandbox to generate emergent stories driven by player interaction. Rather than bolstering these player-driven stories with a thoughtful narrative backdrop, the quests seemingly move the story nowhere. Each quest has a self-contained story, like there's a strange signal, what are the Arc doing in this location, can you get this item for me that I lost in this place, and these, as far as objectives go, are fine. Searching through debris and powering up old tech, hoisting up a raider flag, these are perfect tasks for this world, but the totality of what occurs is so limited in scope that it betrays the massive world that seemingly exists behind it. I want to do a separate video where I talk about the story and what I think is going on, so I won't dive too far into things here. But to illustrate my point that the quests don't offer something that feels very rewarding from a story perspective, let me describe where we start and where we end. When we start our journey as a raider, we are recruited by Shawnee, the Speranza security specialist, to head out topside, repair damaged tech, and investigate what those pesky Arcs are up to. She, like everyone else here, knows that the Ark are constantly strategizing, maneuvering, and operating to suppress humans on Earth. But because we don't truly know what their goal is, there is always some other attack right around the corner that we are not expecting. The people here, like Celeste, who fought against the Ark in the first wave, or Tian Wen, whose mother was killed fighting Arks, know that the Ark will continue their onslaught until whatever that goal is has been reached. The machines they send will continuously advance and pose a greater and greater threat to humanity. This is basically the context that we have after the first few codex entries and quests. Now, fast forward 60 or so quests later, and what has really changed? We now have some backstory about the traders and why they have the character traits that they do, and we learn via our operations, setting up new tech topside, that there is some larger Ark threat coming to the Rust Belt. Now, this isn't to say that learning that stuff about Celeste or Tianwen or Shawnee isn't interesting. It's just that it feels like flavor text that we could largely deduce from their demeanor anyways. Of course, Celeste and Tianwen are more shut off and disheartened because of what has happened to them, and of course they will slowly open up to the idea of having some hope for the future when we start making progress for the Raiders. But like all of the characters, their backstory and behavior is very flat, and like I talked about in my last Ark video, the text-to-speech voices are absurdly bad sometimes, especially in later quests. And when they don't sync with the animations, it's pretty rough as well. I think Embark knew this as well, as there are a handful of randomly placed cutscenes we get throughout the quest line that are like 20-second snippets of background animations and environment scenes, and they make a very strong point of showing very little like character animation stuff and maybe no faces talking, at least as far as I can remember. These disjointed little interludes did get me excited, but they were always so short and ultimately felt like very unsatisfactory animatics that didn't progress anything. Ultimately, the quests lead us to largely the same conclusions as the environmental storytelling. Some structures we see are from different periods. Some larger Ark husks must have been destroyed by means other than kinetic force. The Ark are, for some reason, harvesting resources from our planet. Rather than synergizing with these narrative elements, the quests serve to represent these ideas just in a clunkier manner. I also really don't think this would be as big of a deal if there was literally any additional progression attached to them. Like I said earlier, Embark clearly isn't trying to present a story with like an incredible amount of depth, at least in the terms of telling like a cohesive narrative experience, at least in this capacity, but it becomes glaring just how devoid of value the story told here is when positioned next to the fact that they also offer no progression like we talked about earlier. At the end of the quest chain, we basically know that a larger Ark threat is coming, which once again is what we knew at the beginning. This has been very critical of the quests that are currently available in Ark, but once again, should be kept in mind why the reason you're seeing this video right now as opposed to a few days ago. I finished all the quests and I've been having a blast playing Ark Raiders. It's a fantastic game that is a ton of fun. The quests are just something that I hope they rework in some capacity when they release new ones, hopefully. By having stronger cinematics that play at actual climatic points, by getting voice actors to actually perform the lines, by providing rewards that have any real value. These are changes they could realistically do within their next major content drop, which I would assume is going to arrive at some point early next year. Hopefully, their approach changes a bit to serve the potential they have with the world that they have built, but ultimately, if the player base isn't really engaged with the narrative, it may be enough to maintain the status quo in this regard and just focus on producing great maps and enemies that keep players coming back for the dynamic multiplayer experience that has hooked so many people. I would like to hear your thoughts on the quests and Ark in the comments, and I'll see you later. Bye.